The season is off and running for the Auburn Tigers. They sit 13-1 overall, 1-0 in SEC play, and the second-ranked team in all of college basketball. Helping us break it all down, talk all things Auburn hoops, our good friend Mike Gittens of the War Rapport. He joins the show. Mike, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time and excited to talk Tigers on the hardwood with you.
As always, Chris, thanks for having me here on SEC Unfiltered. It is an exciting time at Auburn. This is Bruce Pearl's best squad. As a matter of fact, there's a conversation happening right now about whether he's the best coach in Auburn basketball history. The guy that he's up against right now has his name on the other Coliseum in Eves. But look, man, Bruce Pearl's done some great things on the Plains. I don't think he's done yet.
So you look at this squad, again, you mentioned it might be his best team yet. I mean, again, 13-1 overall to this point, 1-0 in conference play. We'll get to the conference slate in a moment, but I want to first get your thoughts on non-conference because we saw this Auburn team. You and I were actually talking off air. Hadn't been a lot of close contests. Auburn has been flexing their muscles, winning most of their games, if not all, essentially all but one by double digits. You mix in the loss to Duke, a tough Duke team that, heck, they may see again down the road, but big wins over a top-5 Houston team. You beat Iowa State. We mentioned that 2-point victory. You beat North Carolina. You beat a Memphis who looks really good right now. You pummel Ohio State. You beat a solid Purdue team. Your biggest takeaways, Mike, from the non-conference slate, what did you learn about this Auburn team through that month and a half or so stretch of the non-conference slate?
They're the deepest team in America. That's what I learned. What you saw in the SEC opener versus Missouri was they tried to make that game extremely physical. And for a team that shoots as well as Auburn does, that's how you try to knock them off their game. You get physical with them. It didn't work, Chris. It didn't work. Nothing worked. This team is as deep as any team in America that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years in college basketball. Think about this. And the way that Bruce Pearl has built it, it's been difficult. College basketball is one of the few sports where you lose your best player almost every year. These 5-star freshmen, they last 12 months and they're going off to the NBA. And so for Auburn to have built a senior-laden team, he had to go to the D2 level to find guys like Janai Johnson, who's probably college basketball's most improved player. And look at him out there. Miles Kelly said this at the beginning of the season in the non-conference. He said, you never know who's going to be the guy who can go for 20 to 30 a night on this team. And that wasn't an exaggeration. They probably got 5 or 6 guys who can do that on this squad right now. I think they've got everything covered. They can score in the paint. They can score from outside. They can run with you. They defend as well as anybody in college basketball right now, as long as they can stay out of foul trouble. The non-conference showed us that this is America's deepest team. Even that loss to Duke, I think, showed you something about this team. You go to Cameron Indoor, and I wasn't in love with how they reffed that game. Maybe it's the homer in me, but I thought Auburn showed, even in that loss, that they're the best team in the country.
And it starts with, you mentioned a veteran group, 6'10", 240-pound senior Janai Broom, which you look at the statistics, Mike, he leads Auburn in essentially everything. I mean, points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, best player in the country. I mean, if you best team and leading in every stat, it feels like Janai Broom is that guy for the Tigers and really in all of college basketball.
Thank you, NIL, Chris, because if the reports are to be believed, he got about $1 million to come back to Auburn for another season, and it has paid dividends. Was there a better spent NIL dollar than the dollar spent on Janai Broom to return for this season? I don't think so. And look, this is a really good team with or without Janai Broom, but this is a Final Four team with him 100%. So Janai has impressed so far this season. I love what he's been able to do. And he added the 3-point game to his shot last year. And having a big man be able to shoot the 3, we saw Walker Kessler do this a couple years ago for Auburn. He started to add a 3-point shot, and it allows you to stretch the floor and stretch defenses out. And when you got guys who can make plays and are athletic like Auburn has, man, it makes them really hard to defend.
So as we dive into conference play, Mike, you mentioned obviously Tigers got off to a hot start, taking down Mizzou 84-68. At the time of us speaking tonight, they will head to Austin to take on the Texas Longhorns again. Surprise, surprise. Auburn is a double-digit favorite in that one. Let's get nitpicky here, Mike. From what you saw from Auburn again in the non-conference and, of course, this first conference game against Mizzou, is there anything – because when you have a team as good as Auburn, you're not being measured up against are you going to win the regular season in the SEC or the SEC tournament? It's, are you going to win the national championship? So is there anything you've seen early on that you nitpick and say Auburn needs to clean this up or do this better? I mean, is there anything in particular you look at and say they need to fine tune as the season goes?
They do at times need to learn how to play without fouling. And this is one thing that will hem this team up. It's foul trouble. Sometimes they're a little bit too aggressive on defense, and depending on how the game is being called, if they get in foul trouble early, it really changes what they're trying to do, both offensively and defensively. But that's about the only hole I can see in what they're doing right now. Auburn is extremely disciplined on both sides of the court. And they've got a lot of guys who can play both ways as well, too. Not a lot of purely offensive guys. Tahad Pettiford, the young freshman, man, you got to love what he brings to Bruce Pearl's squad this year. I think he's everything they thought Aiden Holloway would be. He can drop 20 to 30 a night on you. He's a really, really good ball handler. Looks very confident and comfortable out there right now. Not a lot of holes. And that's an extreme nitpick. I want to be clear, Chris. That is an extreme nitpick of this squad. But when you look at that schedule so far, the only game that they didn't win, that they won by less than double digits, was Iowa State. They beat everybody else by double digits. So it's really hard to find holes in that. When you're winning games like that, it's not because you've got a bunch of stuff you need to fix, right? You're doing things at a high level right now, and like I said, I think that Final Four has to be the goal here for this team. If you're Bruce Pearl, you made the Final Four in 2019, and you've had some really good players since. But that squad with Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler that got bounced in the first round versus Miami, that was a senior squad that beat them. That was a senior-laden Miami squad that beat them. They weren't the more talented team, but they were the more disciplined team. And this year, if you're Bruce Pearl, you've got both ends of that. You've got the most talented team and the most senior team, probably in all of college basketball. They've got to go deep into this tournament, I think, or you're going to have to you're going to have some questions about the process here that Bruce Pearl has. He's a great coach, and I don't think anybody will be able to take that away from him. But, we're judged by championships, and that's the name of the game that applies to him too.
Yeah, it does feel like, Mike, again, with the way you're talking about Auburn, what I've seen from Auburn, the discussions around them, I think it's – and you never know in March Madness, right? I mean, it's a crazy time of year. It's one of the reasons we love it. But it does feel like, I mean, with how good this team is, you're not maximizing what they have unless you get to a Final Four or better. I mean, this team can win a national championship. Like, there's just no question. So, zooming out, Mike, in the SEC – it really does feel like it is a three-team race at the top. And I don't want to discount, like a Kentucky or a Florida, but I mean, we've been posing the question, Mike. I'll give you Auburn or Alabama to win the SEC or the field, and who would you take? And I think most people say it's going to be one of those two squads. I throw Tennessee in there as well. Just what do you make, though, from your perspective? Again, you're seeing it from the Auburn lens, but I mean, what do you make of the SEC as a whole, man? Because 13-5. 14-4 may be good enough to win the regular season because it's such a gauntlet. I mean, the latest bracketology we're seeing 13 teams potentially go into the dance. I mean, the league is just so incredibly deep. And thoughts on how Auburn's obviously going to navigate it. Because, again, you got to think you're going to take your licks at some point, right? Like, no matter how good you are, this league is just crazy loaded top to bottom.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the league start to cannibalize itself just a tiny bit as you get into conference play, Chris. But look at those net rankings. Starting at 13, Mississippi State, Kentucky at 12, Alabama at 9, Florida at 8, Tennessee at 3, and Auburn at 1. Now, I want to point this out because I think it's really important. Earlier, we talked about the non-conference schedule, right? Auburn, 6-1 in quad games. They played 7 quad 1 games so far. Tennessee has only played 3 quad 1 games so far this season, and they're 3-0 in those quad 1 games, but they've only played 3 of them. If you're Alabama, you played 5 quad 1 games. You're 3-2 right now in quad 1s. Kentucky is 3-2 in quad 1 games, and Mississippi State is 3-0. But Auburn has played the most quad 1 games of anybody in America right now so far at this point in the season. And with the way the SEC is stacking up, that's only going to go up. I don't see how they finish with not in the top 3 in terms of total quad 1 games played. So, look, Alabama can score the basketball. But if you're asking me right now, based on what we've seen so far, Auburn's been tested. Auburn's truly been tested, and they've been tested twice as much as most of their peers. I think Alabama is weak defensively, and if it gets into a defensive struggle, a guy like the Auburn Tigers, and then after that, I like Tennessee, and then, Florida's looking really, really good right now. I think honestly, Alabama is maybe the third or fourth best team in the SEC right now.
And that says a lot because the league is crazy deep. It's deep. It's very deep. The Auburn schedule is really going to pick up here in the next few weeks. I mean, obviously, again, we mentioned tonight as we're speaking, the game at Texas. You go to South Carolina this weekend, but then, like I said, next week, Mississippi State at Georgia. You got number 1 Tennessee. You look further down the schedule. You go to a top 25 Ole Miss. You got Florida coming to town. Of course, the 2 big ones against Alabama at their place, and finishing the season at home for a game that might be for the regular season title. Maybe it's clinched before then, but at Kentucky, I mean, this is if you're looking for, it's going to be must-see TV, Mike, throughout this season. I mean, really, with the matchups that at Texas A&M's a sneaky one too. They're the last week of the season, so there's no place to hide for anybody in the conference. Like it's like you said, it's going to cannibalize itself, and I think we are going to see the cream rise to the top, probably again like an Auburn, stand amongst the rest, if you will. So
yeah, I mean, Auburn has 30 games scheduled. 16 of them right now, with who they've already played and who they have left to play, are ranked matchups.
Yeah,
16. That's over half the schedule, Chris, is ranked matchups. The SEC is the premier basketball conference right now. I don't think that's debatable. For a long time, the ACC held that title with teams like Duke and North Carolina, and everybody expected them to make runs. During those days, it was Kentucky and everybody else in the SEC. Florida had that stretch where they won back-to-back titles. I think it was 06, 07 in basketball, the Billy Donovan years. But look, man, it's the SEC and everybody else right now. Now that you've added Texas and Oklahoma to the conference, good God, man, it is a gauntlet of just really, really tough matchups week in and week out. It's why we've seen now that Big 12 SEC matchup that they're doing every year, giving fans a little taste of a tournament in season between a lot of teams that are going to make the tournament. So they've got to justify that by making deep runs in March in that tournament. But I think they're perfectly capable of that. It's going to be really fun to watch.
And Mike, on that note, before we get you out of here, of course, again, Auburn's, I don't think it's too bold to say this season is going to be judged off or measured up against, did you win a championship? And how close did you get to winning a championship if you don't finish it off? If Auburn's going to achieve that ultimate goal in your mind, what has to click for this team? Again, throughout the regular season, sure, SEC tournament, but throughout March, like what's the thing or maybe things that you think for this team, if it can all come together in this aspect, this team truly can win it all?
The talent is there. The coaching is there. Ultimately, just don't beat yourself. When Chad Baker-Mazara got the flagrant that got him tossed against Yale in the tournament last year, they lost that game by 2 points. If he plays, there's no way they lose that game. You just got to play smart. You have to play within yourself. You got to stick to the plan. You have to believe in the system. It's what's going to get you there. This is Elite Eight or bust, Chris. With this squad right now, this is Elite Eight or bust. And, year after year, we talk about this Auburn squad. When Jabari and Walker Kessler were here, they got to number 1 in the nation during that season. I don't know if you remember. But to get bounced in the first round was embarrassing. Right? And you can't have that this year. This is a much better team than that team was. You've got the best player in college basketball. You've got the best bench in college basketball. You've got the best defense and the best conference in college basketball. When the tournament gets here, they need to prepare like champions, and they got to go out and win it. And look, anything can happen beyond the Sweet 16. But I will say this, Chris, too. Last year, Auburn was a 5 seed. And there was arguments about whether they should have been a 4 seed and what. This year, if you're not a top 3 seed come tournament time, that something went wrong at the end of your season. The NCAA committee has proven that what happens in these conference tournaments matters very little in terms of the seeding. If you're Auburn, you got to. I would venture to say you got to be a 1 or a 2 seed right now. If you fall out of that 1 or 2 seed spot by the end of the season, by conference tournament time, something went extremely wrong for Auburn probably in the month of February. So they've got it. They've got to garner one of those top seeds and get that easy path, I think, to the Sweet 16. You got to beat a tough game there. Remember, the Final 14 beat the 3 winningest programs in college basketball history on their way to the Final Four that year. And you're going to have to pull off something probably similar this year if you're going to make it back.
Mike Gittens of the War Rapport does a fantastic job talking all things Auburn Tigers. Mike, I know you're busy these days, so let folks know what you guys have got going on over the War Rapport and where to find all of your great work.
So busy, Chris. Check us out on YouTube at The War Rapport. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Gittens or at The War Rapport on every social media platform. Actually working another project here, Chris, with Locked On UCF, bringing UCF fans a lot of great content over there. Go subscribe to us on YouTube over there as well to help us hit that 1,000 sub mark. Chris, we're working on it. But we just hit 700 a couple days ago. Got to get to that 1,000 mark. That's the holy grail there on YouTube. So we appreciate you guys' support.
Mikey the man, dude. I appreciate you taking the time. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Thanks, Chris.